All right, everyone. Can we turn this on? Great. Welcome, everyone. Come on in. Have a seat. We have a little triangle or something. Get your coffee and come sit down. Or stand. It's fine. Just, calm down. There are slides for this hour, if we could bring those up. Oh, you're on top of it, thanks. All right, well, welcome everyone to the LEAG Town Hall today. I'm glad to have you. The Lunar Exploration Analysis Group is an analysis group that provides analysis and not advice to NASA. We're not a FACA chartered group, but this is your representatives for feeding your ideas and your opinions about lunar programs and research and priorities into the NASA planning process. So I'm Barbara Cohen. Sam Lawrence is our chair. He's not able to be here today. I'm on the committee. Noah Petro and Ryan Watkins are both here today. Sarah is an ex officio member for headquarters. Greg is here for survey, so there's a whole bunch of us here. You can ask any of us. I need the oh, here it is. You can ask any of us later, or you can ask me today. So what we're going to do is Sam sent me a whole bunch of slides to tell you about what LEAG has been doing over the last couple years to give you a flavor of some of the activities that we do with the community and for the community. And then after that, this should only take, 15 minutes. And then after that, what I want to do, and I want to plant this idea in your heads right now, one of the main things that's coming up that's in my wheelhouse is we need to start thinking about how to feed the next decadal survey. We're just having a midterm review of the decadal survey. That's going to come out in a month or two, but we already need to start thinking as a community about what our next steps are for the next decadal survey. So we'll see some of that come up for the next LEAG meeting, but that's something that we should be thinking about, and we particularly want to hear from our Nextgen folks, and this is a really good opportunity. You're all here today, you're all here this week. I don't know if you're going to be able to come to LEAG or not. I hope you do come to the LEAG meeting in November, but if you don't or you aren't able to, now is your time to really be thinking about it. And again, you can talk to us during the public session or you can come up to us afterward. All right, so let's get started. We are jointly chartered by HEO and SMD, so we provide analysis to both groups. This is really important. This is, again, what we've been hearing all week for survey. Survey also tries to bridge these two communities. LEAG is very committed to bridging these two communities as well. We think what's good for one is good for the other. Science enables exploration. It's not just a tagline. We really all do believe this. We also represent the lunar community to commercial interests. We have commercial interests embedded within us, and we'll talk a little bit about that too, but we provide advice to anyone who wants it. We do have an annual LEAG meeting that is in November this year. You can apply for awards. They're actually sponsored by Survey to come to the LEAG meeting. So if you're a student, you don't even have to give a presentation or submit an abstract. So we will have a forum for students and next-gen people to participate in LEAG. So really, please apply for those and get some funding named after one of our great mentors, B. Ray Hawk. We host town halls like this one at the Survey meeting, also at LPSC, and we host Nextgen networking sessions, especially at LPSC. New this year, we had an in-person meeting of our commercial advisory board, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And anyone can request special action teams to study particular topics in detail. And what that means is that someone would come to us, like headquarters or anyone else, if you want to have $20,000, you can just give a test to give a study. You would give that to the executive committee. They would form a committee of interested members from the community who have the relevant expertise and lead a meeting that comes out with a report that gives you really solid advice. Here's our membership. Yep, so like I said, Sam Lawrence is our new chair, and you can see the cast of characters here: Dana Hurley, Clive Neal, me, Brett Denevi, Ryan, Clyde Watkins, Louise Proctor back here is our representative from the LPI. Noah for LRO. Jasper's not here this week, is he? As our Artemis representative. Our ISRU expertologist, Sherry Sanders. Our Commercial Advisory Board chair is Kurt Klaus. James Carpenter represents ESA, and our NASA folks here, Sarah and Ben and Greg. Okay, this is a pretty great list of the activities that LEAG has led or been involved in the last couple of years. I'm talking about a subset of these in pretty good detail. What are those things? Oh, okay. So we just had a meeting of the Commercial Advisory Board a couple weeks ago. I actually got to go. Ben Bussey was there. And this has 70 members now. So this is really an important function that LEAG has taken on, which is trying to coordinate expectations and capabilities between the commercial world, people who are really interested in landing on the moon, who are interested in using the resources of the moon to make money for profit, right? But also those things are going to help us all, right? If we can enable access to the moon, regular access to the moon, cheaper access to the moon, living off the resources of the moon, all of those things are going to help us in the LEAG community. So this was a great coordination effort by LEAG, and now it got so big actually that there's a steering committee so that no one has to coordinate 70 people all the time. And we did have our first in-person meeting of the fellows, which is a subset of that committee, and it was just super, super valuable. So what we did was we presented a lot of the things that you saw yesterday, and we'll talk a little bit more about today. So things like the landing site workshop. Where does the science community want to go on the moon? We talked about some of our reports. The one that you saw Carly and Dave and Bill give yesterday, right? The report of advancing science on the moon. And LEAG also produced another report about advancing science on the moon. So what does the science community want to do? What do we think is really important? And how do we think we should be implementing those? So we tried to break those down into early missions, things that were simple to implement, then things that would be more and more complex. And we try to communicate these kinds of priorities to the commercial providers so that they know what's coming up and they know what they're going to be competing for. They know how to implement our priorities. And in turn, we get some idea of what they want to be doing for us, what their capabilities are going to be, and we can set our expectations to the community. So you'll have findings of that coming out soon that we can look toward. This is old news, but there was a big meeting for Planetary Science Vision 2050, 50. That was at headquarters a couple of years ago, and we had all the ag groups presented their vision for what was going to be coming up in the next several decades. So we had a good turnout. Sam gave a really rousing speech about opening the true gateway to the solar system, which is the moon. So we had a good showing there. LEAG at LPSC, we do a town hall like this every year at LPSC as well, and we have a LEAG networking event that has turned into a pretty big deal on Wednesday nights. So this is something that's a social event that you can go meet really famous lunar scientists in a social setting, much like this one. Okay, this is an important report that came out recently, Advancing Science of the Moon. Some years ago, there was a small group with the National Academies. It was a National Academies report called The Scientific Context for the Exploration of the Moon. And that was written during the epoch of Constellation when we were going to be sending humans to a base. And they wanted to know what science could be done when you have humans on the moon. And we all know there's a lot of science that can be done, but why not write a report about it? So we wrote this report, and that was 10 years ago. And so now that the moon is back in focus, headquarters quite presciently asked LEAG to conduct a review of the progress that's been made since then on this report and anything that needs to be updated. So there were 8 concepts and associated goals in that report, and there were 3 that this report kind of missed or didn't really realize the importance of. So we did this study last year. This is who was on it. It was co-chaired by Brett Denevi at APL and Sam Lawrence, and you can see the cast of characters there. One thing that was important about this is Sam and Brett really tried to make sure that this included some next-gen folks, right? This is really important to be passing the baton on, where it's not the same cast of characters, where it's been for a long time in lunar science, and really try to involve our next generation of folks who are the ones who are going to be around when we are actually doing these kinds of activities. The moon is a world full of opportunity. I think you all know this. This is really preaching to the choir, but these are things that are in this report. Really encourage you to go download this report. It's actually a really good resource. So it re-emphasizes that the moon is awesome. It's a readily accessible target for human and robotic missions. There's a lot of science left to be done. We did find that we'd made significant progress. We've had GRAIL, we've had LADI, we've had LRO. So there's a lot of progress that we've made on some of these concepts. And so the ones that are remaining are really the ones where we need landing. And that point has been made several times during this conference and in other reports. It's only emphasized again here. And the new areas that were identified in this report are the lunar volatile cycle. This is something that's come up just fairly recently. It was sort of around when the report was written first, but it wasn't really widely disseminated, and we've had so much more information on this now to make it into a true volatile cycle. The origin of the moon, Jack Schmidt referred to this earlier too, is that we've got a lot of work still to do on the origin of the moon, so it's not a simple cut and dried hit and run. There's a lot more to do, and lunar tectonism and seismicity got its own breakout subject. Another special action team that we did was Next Steps on the Moon. And as I referred to earlier, this was a report that really tried to break down how do we implement those science priorities. So we told you what the science priorities are, but now how do we really do that? And how do we do it in a way that fits in with the current program? So it's not just discovery missions and New Frontiers missions. So we really broke this down into what are the on-ramps for potential commercial involvement, what are new technologies that would enable and enhance lunar science? What are some synergies that we can build with human and precursor missions? And so we developed 5 examples from the previous report. We picked 5 of those really high important science questions, and then we developed example mission archetypes. And I really want to say example here. It's hard to balance as an analysis group. It's hard to balance breaking this down into something so granular that people can really run with and say, oh, I see, you want this instrument to go here, without being overly prescriptive and saying this is what the community needs to get on board with. We want to encourage everyone's creativity. We want to have everyone propose their own ways of solving these science questions, but we do want to make sure that we've got instruments ready to fly on commercial landers, that we've got small bites that we can take, that we understand the scope of our bigger missions. So these are just examples in this report. So there's a lot of missions. I think you could all guess that was an outcome of this report. There's lots of different things we can and should be flying. There's numerous potential opportunities for commercial services, sort of even depending on what those services want to be. Some of them just want to drop off cargo. Some of them want to integrate more with things like touching the surface or have instruments that need to do special things. There are on-ramps for all of those. We actually had a finding here about LRO being able to enable some of our future exploration, both providing landing site coverage and then looking at assets after they have landed, hopefully successfully, but as Noah showed you yesterday, not always successfully. So the goals that we picked out here, exploring a lunar magnetic anomaly, assessing the resource potential of the lunar poles and the equatorial pyroclastic deposits, understanding the bombardment history of the inner solar system, you can guess who took that one, explore the geology of IMPs, irregular Mare patches, and understanding the structure of the lunar interior. Oh, yeah, so those are just the ones we picked, and then for each one of those, we have, I think, 4 different implementation options, like the small, medium, large, and human-sized kinds of things. And so you can go and look at this and just say, oh, I see. You know, if I wanted to fly a medium-class mission to understand the bombardment history, here's some ideas. Again, not prescriptive, but here's how you could do that. Volatiles 2 sat is was commissioned as an international team to look at all the international missions that are going to the poles or want to go to the poles, so you can see representation from the US, Canada, China, Korea, Japan, UK, Germany, and all the space agencies. And this is, again, building on another report, the VSAT report of 2015. I can make all of these slides available to you so you don't have to scramble to write these down, and all of these are available on the LEAG website as well. So they looked at a whole bunch of things like landing sites and instrumentation and data sharing and all these good things. So there were 18 findings, which is a lot for just the volatiles. And there's go look at this report. This is a really, really good report. Missions should visit different sites. There's lots of missions to be done. Communications relay infrastructure is really enabling, even for polar exploration. There's places that we need to go that may or may not have direct line of sight to Earth. So communication relays, like something that might be on the gateway, would be really, really enabling. And this also looked at resource prospecting, and they looked at it in a two-phase way. So first doing the measurements and doing the understanding what's there, and then going and touching it, and as I said a long time ago, licking the surface. So you need to know what's there, and then you need to go figure out how to make it work and how to get the resources out of it. LEAG 2017, this was last year, biggest LEAG meeting we've ever had. No coincidence, because we had just announced the US new space policy to go back to the moon like 3 days before this happened. So tons of people came to this, scientists, engineers, journalists, space advocates, astronauts, everyone was there. It was a really, really great meeting. We put out findings from those meetings, right? We're an analysis group, so when you come to those meetings and you have something to say, we can make it into a finding, and those findings go to NASA. They're not advice, they're things that NASA can choose to look at and incorporate or not, and they can take the pulse of the community. So our findings from the 2017 meeting, some of them have become overcome by events, shall we say. So the first two about resource prospecting and polar volatiles, those are not in the cards in the near term, but they are something that we know headquarters is keeping on the plate, right? They want to be able to do these kinds of missions. So this advice does not go totally unnoticed. We asked for the expansion of salmon to include commercial providers. We wanted to reiterate that the moon is a strategic destination, both for science and human exploration. We want some sort of technology development. There's a workshop, we'll say again, there's a workshop about surviving the lunar night that's going to come up at the LEAG meeting this year. So what are the technologies that we need to be able to enable some of the things we want to do? And then we also asked to establish milestones. This is something that maybe LEAG is going to take on itself. What are the milestones to establish a real cislunar economy? What do we want to see over the next 10 years? What are the concrete steps we need to be taken? Let's skip that. Lunar Science for Landed Missions, you heard this already. The report came out about places that we want to land, so you can go read that. Here are all the places. This isn't even all the places. Actually, if you read my abstract from that conference, it just said go near side, far side, upside, downside. It wasn't a lie. Go anywhere on the moon. We just want to land on the moon. We just want to land. Okay, LEAG 2018, our meeting is November 14 through 16 in Columbia, Maryland, at USRA headquarters, which is where we've had it for the last several years. We are trying to move away from having this be an LPSC-like format where we submit abstracts and talk about our science and move more toward the model of other advisory groups where we report out on these SATs, right? Instead of me just giving you a slide that says we did a SAT, those SATs would actually report out. We would understand a little bit more about what's going on. And some things that we also want to do, prepare for the next decadal. We want to understand the commercial lunar program as it evolves. We want to have input from the providers and from the scientists into how that goes. We want to have a community workshop to feed into LRO's next extended mission and the goals that the community wants to see LRO pursue, not just their science team. And very special surprise guest speakers. I don't know what that is, so you can press me for the information on that, but I can't give it to you. And then we're also going to have a special meeting the day before the LEAG meeting, so November 13th. And that's a joint survey workshop with LEAG on how to survive and operate in the lunar night. So this has been done before. It's not that new, but that was a generation ago. That wasn't our generation. It wasn't our technologies. We can't just go to those providers anymore and ask them for their technology. So what do we need to do to be able to operate and survive during the lunar night? Okay, we have a roadmap. You can follow that roadmap. And with that, I will take some questions.
Thanks. That was a fantastic summary. It's really been a privilege joining with LEAG for all the years that we've existed. One of the things that I wanted to point out, everyone's starting to think about this, is that next year is a really big anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. And so one of the things that we talked about at the Survey Executive Committee on Monday is preparing for that. And I think this would be a real logical thing, like we do so much of, to join with LEAG and think of things that we, the community, can do in our various communities across this country and across the world. And so we have just started to think about having a workshop without walls. I would like to invite everyone here to attend that. We don't know when it is yet, but sometime in the coming months we'll start to plan that. We'll probably talk about it at LEAG as well. But this is a huge opportunity for this community, and we'd love to do it with LEAG.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Hello. Was wondering a little bit about what LEAG is doing in terms of outreach to try to get like different people from across the space community, like not just who we have now, but like newer members, younger members involved.
So LEAG itself doesn't do outreach in that sense, but in terms of bringing people under the tent, we are very interested in that. So we have a Nextgen component, and Ryan is the point of contact for that. And so she does a lot of work, as do the whole Nextgen group. We are trying to have a very specific topic or session or something, we haven't decided exactly what yet, at the LEAG meeting in November that's specifically devoted to Next-Gen opinions, because it can be hard sometimes to get your voice in edgewise against, you know, more established people who have definite opinions about things and where we should go. So we definitely want to bring that in. I guess, well, and we have those travel grants to bring into LEAG as well. Brian, what else do you think we can?
Like Barb said, kind of the big thing we're doing this year is just trying to get a dedicated discussion or something going that brings in specifically next-gen students, early career people, just so you understand that your opinions and your thoughts are valued and that they count. But yeah, so there's been a good partnership between Next-Gen and LEAG in the last few years. Again, the travel grant is another big one, and I think this year they've kind of lifted the you must submit an abstract restriction in order to encourage more young students to apply and attend LEAG. So that's kind of our big thing, is again just the partnership between LEAG and Next-Gen. And yeah, for those of you who don't know what Next-Gen is, it's basically students and postdocs and early career folks. So if you are one of those people, come see me and I'll make sure you're involved in our communications and what's going on and help get you connected with LEAG as well.
And especially if you have ideas on how we can do that better, please do. If you haven't heard of it, why haven't you heard of it? How do you want this to go? How do you want your voice to be heard? We are totally open to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. If you don't have questions specific about LEAG, one thing that I wanted to do, since we have a couple of minutes, is if you have, we can turn this into just a discussion. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I got one. Barb, with regards to the new format and how that's going to play out, something very unique about the lunar community is the commercial aspect.
Yeah.
Mars eventually, yeah, maybe. but obviously Venus and outer planets, not so much. And one other agency or community I haven't seen involved enough, I think, in LEAG, especially as we move more and more to potentially commercial avenues. There's the commercial in terms of landing and roving and whatever else, but from a resource standpoint is the USGS. And of course, their new director is an astronaut, former astronaut. And he's very, it is, you know, the directive of the USGS to understand resources and the strategic value and need to the United States. And so you probably know too that the Palo Alto office now resides here at Ames. They've all moved down here with us, and I've had the pleasure of working with them over the last year or two, getting crash course educated on what it really means to look for resources the way they've been doing it for 100 years. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us as a community to start to pull in this expertise beyond the astro mapping, you know, USGS Flagstaff office, but really getting into these people who do the resource categorization, characterization, mapping for economics. I've seen very little of that actually in the literature. And so as you bring this format together, let's make sure there's open avenues there. So it's, you know, none of these people are participating right now in the SATs or anything like that. So we should try to find ways to pull them in. They're very interested now, obviously, in doing that.
It's an excellent point, Tony. We've been talking about how do we establish economic geology as a field of study in planetary science in a similar way that we do for the Earth, which is an applied science. So you're still a scientist, but you're applying it to something. I have noticed this for Mars. I was involved in the Humans to Mars effort, and those, ISRU folks were like, well, how many, molecules of water to one molecule of sulfur, and how big is that, and how far do you have to dig before you find it? And we were like, right? Asteroids, same thing, asteroid mining. How do I break down, this clay molecule versus that clay molecule? So I think there is a field there that is ready to get started, and that is an excellent thing for LEAG to sink its teeth into. Thanks.
Just got an email from Sam Lawrence just reminding people that there are copies of the ASM SAT for people to read on their long flights home. Available at the front.
There are. Pick them up and read them on your way home, and then leave them on the plane for someone else to read. Take two. Leave them in the airport. Yeah, Tim.
Hey, so I have a strong opinion that I want to.
Yeah, good.
So I think rightly so, LEAG and Survey have, and our commercial partners have spent a lot of time thinking very hard and doing a lot of planning for future surface operations. I think one thing that I've noticed tends to get left out of the picture is what do we need for orbital assets? And I'm not talking about telecommunications. I've been accused of wanting a Christmas tree every telecom orbiter with scientific instrumentation. There's certain things we can do with Gateway. There's certain things we can't do with Gateway. There's certain things we can do with CubeSats. We can't do everything with CubeSats. I think one thing that the collective brain power of LEAG could do is think very hard about what types of measurements we can do from orbit that will increase our chances of being successful on the surface. I'll point to ShadowCam going on KPLO, right? So LRO is 9-ish years old. We had LROC, there's LROC right there. It's been amazingly successful. ShadowCam, I think I heard, is 10,000 times more sensitive than LROC. We've had advances certainly in visible near infrared spectroscopic instruments. Imagine sending another M-cubed, maybe with CRISM spatial resolution or something like that, doing much better. We've had advances in the thermal IR. There's been advances in neutron and X-ray detection, and can make a lot of different measurements from orbit that would increase our ability to prospect for resources, that would increase our ability to do good science, find the right samples for dating in different places. So I think LEAG is a really good place where we can kind of tap into our collective brain power. Maybe do something like the Mars community did with their NextSat at MEPAG, where they say, here's a straw man payload for a mission that would be really useful before we do Mars sample return, whatever. But something that I think has tended to get a little bit lost or forgotten about. I just wanted to bring it up, to the community and see what other folks might think.
Yeah, thanks. And something that I sort of glossed over in the LEAG meeting, something that I would like to see, and I'm speaking as myself now, not as, I haven't coordinated this with the rest of the LEAG team yet, but MEPAG had a successful meeting recently where they had everyone who cared to put in a poster about what they want the next mission to be. Discovery class, small sat class, CubeSat, New Frontiers class, flagship class. Just what do you think the next science that needs to be addressed? Flow down from the science, take a chunk out of science, flow it down to a mission, if it's an orbiter, if it's a lander, whatever it wants to be. And then they went through and collected all those ideas and said, okay, well, here's sort of the pulse of the community. Here's where we think we can make really big progress for maybe a class of missions that we haven't really dug our teeth into yet, right? And so I think that my personal opinion is sometimes we think orbiters can go in discovery, and so maybe we don't need to prioritize them as much. But it's a really fair point that we've spent a lot of time on landers, and we've been trying to help headquarters as they've ramped up this lander program with commercial landers. But there's maybe at the expense of orbital assets. So I hear you, we're taking that note, and I would definitely encourage you, if we do something like this at LEAG, to put some of those ideas in.
Barbara, having come out of the world of economic geology many, many decades ago, I strongly recommend that start to see that discipline emphasized. I think we think that way in many cases, but at the risk of touting a particular book that I wrote, Return to the Moon is in part a treatise in economic geology related primarily to helium-3, but also to solar wind volatiles in general. And I think if you want to people might take a look at it, it does tend to cover the discipline of economic geology with respect to those particular resources, potential resources.
Also, you should read that book and then leave it on a plane too for someone else.
Just to follow up on your last comment, it's important to remember that you can propose orbital instrument to CLIPS. Yes, to be in the CLIPS catalog, you have to be a provider of lander services, but many of those companies intend to have an orbital component. So CLIPS can actually fund orbital payload. But I think LEAG did a good job with the NextSat report. What you're talking about is almost like doing the ORDT we did before LRO to determine what instruments would you actually want to fly, and I agree.
Yeah, and there is also a potential opportunity from Gateway where someone else gives you the delta V to get almost there, and then you sort of pop off from there and go into a lunar orbit. So there may be a special niche opportunity for orbital assets coming up. Anyone else? Anyone have really strong opinions on the last decadal survey or the next decadal survey, or things that you're missing?
So I just have a quick question, thinking out loud. So I know there's the roadmap and there's the decadal. So something that MEPAG has done that has been good is the goals document to prioritize the science. So I'm wondering how in LEAG we can tackle that and maybe help inform like the CLIPS program, for example. Because that seemed to be one of the themes that came out yesterday is like, what is the prioritization and how do we decide, which missions should go first and what instruments between science and technology and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering what LEAG's thinking on that.
So when Sam gave these slides a couple of weeks ago and he showed you the roster of people who are on the LEAG Executive Committee, I saw that next to my name was all of a sudden science goals document. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. So the short answer is we should talk later. I think what we do want is to have that. It's been very useful for MEPAG to be a strong advocate for their near-term goals. And so we get that question a lot, and you probably do too. That's nice that you have all these landing sites. And that's nice that you have all the science that you want to do. What is the priority? And we really have to wrap our minds around that, not only for our community and you know, the people who we're trying to work with, but for the decadal survey both. So we have to do that. We haven't done it. We're going to do it. All right.